Hello there, and welcome to this very special sort of introductory video to the podcast channel. By now, you'll have seen a couple of trailers for the podcast, so you'll have a vague idea of what it's going to be. It will be a very inclusive, sort of looking at all of the Star Trek series kind of podcast with various different guests who. People talk about Star Trek a lot on the internet who embody Starfleet values and things like that that I have picked that do so. But it occurs to me that as part of the podcast, basically, I decided that just for the first sort of 5 or 10 minutes, it would be a sort of getting to know you of these people, as I'm interested in sort of how everybody in their own way comes to Star Trek, what their first series are, and some of their favorites. And so, yeah, I realized that I should probably put something recorded on the YouTube channel that explained what my answer to those questions would be, rather than me constantly just going over it with each individual person, or just not seeing it and then asking everybody else and not contributing myself. So, in any case, that's basically what I'm doing here. So yeah, hopefully you'll find it remotely interesting. What I will be doing is punctuating with various pictures of my Star Trek collection along the way, which might keep it a little bit more interesting for you. Just little bits and pieces of the things that I own that, to emphasize my Trek geek credentials maybe along the way. But yeah, so we'll start by saying, how did I get into Star Trek is the question that I would always ask um, of the particular guest every week. Or how did you get into Star Trek is what I would be asking first. And so in my case, the answer to that question is a little complicated. It's two-pronged, if that makes sense. And so the very first Star Trek that I remember seeing was because of my mum, who's a huge fan of the original series. So we used to watch that quite often. I do have memories of sort of watching episodes of the original series in the background on Sundays when mum was doing the ironing or stuff. Like that old story about how the band to Pow formed, because yeah, she had memories of the same sort of on a Sunday watching it, and she came across that character. That could well have been a story from my life in a weird sort of way. So I remember watching that, but not really being, as a really young kid, super interested in it. But then, as I got around about sort of 9 or 10 years old, my mum started collecting. Back then, it was VHSs, the videos from Britannia Video of Star Trek, because they released an original series collection that they were doing. I think it was 2 episodes per videotape, and then the movies as well. And so I remember vividly that was the first time, because it was a huge deal, that you could actually get the pilot episode, The Cage, available to watch fully on home media. And so because, like, in the ether, I could sense the sort of excitement about that. When my mum's video of The Cage came, I watched it kind of along with her, and I remember being absolutely captivated by it. I really liked it. There's a bit of an irony in that it was a rejected pilot by the network, because apparently they thought it would be too cerebral and wouldn't hook people in. But in my case, I really, really, really liked it. It's still one of my favorite episodes. I've rewatched it a lot. So there is that. But even still, I think there was still a part of me that was kind of I was latching on to the idea that, well, the original series is perhaps the only true Star Trek, which, believe it or not, was quite prevalent back then, in the same way that you do see a lot of people now saying, certain things aren't canon or they don't count or whatever. There was a little bit of that bias towards the Next Generation, and Next Gen was still kind of in the middle of its run when I was, I guess, being introduced to the original series. And so, yeah, that was kind of all the Star Trek there was, unbelievably as it sounds. And so that kind of became sort of, I watched the odd episode of the original series. I was never into any of them in the same excitement level as that sort of viewing of The Cage, but I loved certain episodes, don't get me wrong. But I didn't think anything of it. It was just, well, that's those 79 episodes, and in the words of Futurama, there's about 30 good ones, and that's Star Trek. And then, when I was in my probably early teens, we got Sky TV in at the flat where we lived, and I vividly remember this. It was Sky One would show Star Trek: The Next Generation every day from 5 till 6 with adverts, obviously. And one day I just decided, well, this is on every day, so we'll give it a watch. And there's, even then I knew there was like 7 seasons worth by that point. So there was like 100 and something episodes, and I was like, we'll give it a watch and see what it's like. I think I like science fiction, and I've liked Star Trek in the past in some form. And I remember the very first episode that I watched. Well, I actually don't, because I can't remember what the order is, but I know the first two episodes I watched were The Next Generation, Disaster, and Conundrum. But I can't remember which way around they are. But I know they're both in season 5. I think the first one I saw was Disaster. Well, that was certainly the one that got me interested, because again, it's one of my favourites now. Looking back, I think it's a great sort of character piece. It introduces you to everything really well. And it's got an emotional core to it that I think represents Star Trek in a fantastic kind of way. But yeah, also Conundrum, I remember being one of the first, if not the first, that I watched, because I had a vague sort of working knowledge of Next Gen. And spoiler alert if you haven't seen that episode, but basically the ship is infiltrated by an alien force that kind of wipes the crew's memories and imitates the ship's first officer. And I do vividly remember thinking at the time, oh, I thought Will Riker was the first officer, but in this kind of weird illusion environment that the aliens created, he wasn't. He was second officer. And I was like, oh, maybe I've misunderstood. I'll have to see what's going on here. And then at the end, when the reveal came, I kind of felt that weird sort of proud of myself of like, I figured that out because I knew Riker was first officer, in that weird way you get when you're a kid. And that because you're sort of, without realizing it, you're invested in that world and you've understood something. So I think that kind of possibly helped as well. But yeah, suffice to say that the fascination kind of grew from there. It was Star Trek: The Next Generation. I started loving more and more of those episodes. I wouldn't get into a big list, but yeah, I loved them. And then obviously hearing the reputation of certain things. So I remember that the very first Star Trek video that I bought for myself was the feature-length version of The Best of Both Worlds, which I had on a gold video tape. And I now have had on various formats, but also do have on its own Blu-ray, despite owning season 3 and 4 anyway. But, it's a cool thing to have, and I like it. And yeah, I remember having, for around that kind of time, I was getting into it for sort of birthdays and Christmases. I was getting like Q Continuum box sets with all of the Q episodes on videos, or all of the feature-length Next Gens in a box set, or the Borg Cube, which folded down into 3 or 4 separate videos with all the Borg episodes. And it was an exciting time. And then, around that time I started collecting the Star Trek fact files, which have now become the fantastic kind of Eagle Moss Starship books, and the in-depth look at the main series ships and things. So yeah, and I do, one of my perhaps biggest regrets is that at the time I was bought various Star Trek things that, because of like hardships and stuff that came between then and now, I've kind of sold and not had. But I do remember having a Light and Sound pretty big size Enterprise E, and a build your own Klingon Bird of Prey and Kazon Raider that I kind of built and painted and everything. But again, I don't have them now, which is gutting. But what I do have is the Eagle Moss Starship collections, which I can't recommend enough. They're fantastic, in various kind of sizes and ships. You can see for yourself what they are probably on the pictures now, and see how many of them you can identify. What I did set out to decide at the start of the collection was that, in the interest of saving money in space, I would only collect Starfleet ships, which I've kind of stuck to, with the exception of the fact that I got the Borg Sphere from the Eagle Moss collection, and as a Christmas present, I was bought the light-up Borg cube it's not from Eagle Moss, it came with a little book. I also happen to have the light-up shuttlecraft Galileo, but that's just in a random spot that I forgot to take a picture of. So I have never really broken it apart from that 1 or 2 little times, and potentially the USS Vengeance, which I suppose is Section 31, but that's a branch of Starfleet, so I think that's a loophole that I'll allow. But yeah, I love all Star Trek. I love the newer stuff. Not all of it, as you'll probably hear in the first episode, but certainly a lot of it. And you'll see on my shelves and stuff that I have Discovery Season 1 and 2 and the short treks, and a lot of newer books and stuff that incorporate the new Trek stuff, or whatever you want to call it. hopefully in a non-derogatory way. I own all the movies and love them. I've even got the director's cut of Wrath of Khan, the big box set of the first 10 movies, which has seen better days, unfortunately, with the outside cardboard packaging. Probably could have been packaged better, but it's still there, and the Blu-rays are fantastic. Great value, lots of features and stuff. Yeah, and as I say, on my shelves, you can see I've got almost every episode across the various different series, as I've mentioned before on social media. There's a few I'm missing, but not that many. And yeah, so I've loved Star Trek for a long time. But in terms of a favourite series, it would have to be Next Generation for me, which is why it's represented loud and proud in my hallway, the sort of top of the stairs of my house, and a lot of the sort of ships and things that I own, I guess, as well. A close second, though, is Voyager, which I really grew to love when it aired. It was at that difficult, kind of awkward teenage growing pains time of life, and it was kind of a little second family for me, and I enjoyed it and really loved getting into it. And I remember that was the geeky period of getting excited about seeing, for example, the first images of the USS Prometheus before it aired in Message in a Bottle and stuff like that. And yeah, loved Deep Space Nine after the first couple of seasons, which I couldn't really get into at first, but ended up watching and loving all of it. And again, collected all of these on video, which I now don't have because they've been replaced on DVD and Blu-ray. So yeah, so I mean, obviously, I'm heavily into Star Trek, and it's become a passion for me. It's something that gives me a lot of kind of happiness and comfort and that feeling of community. And so, yeah, the very first time I attended any kind of convention, it was a Comic Con in Newcastle, and I was lucky enough to get my photo taken with a couple of Star Trek related guests who also signed things for me. And the first of which was Daphne Ashbrook, who I was there ostensibly to see because she's known for Doctor Who for being the companion in the Eighth Doctor TV movie, but she also did star in the second season of Deep Space Nine, ironically, as Dr. or Ensign Melora Paslar. And I thought she did a really good job, which I did talk to her about when we met, which was cool. She was really nice and sweet. And I did briefly meet David Warner, who, Star Trek veteran. He was Gold Madred in Chain of Command, the excellent Next Gen episodes. He was St. John Talbot, the Federation representative in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, and Chancellor Gorkon in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. He's done a ton of huge movies and sci-fi and stuff that I won't go into, but he was very popular, so it wasn't really much of a chance to chat, unfortunately. We just kind of rushed through, got my photo taken, said a quick hello, but at least it's there for posterity. Yeah, and as you'll see in the pictures, from years and years ago, going back some way before that time, just to prove my cosplay credentials, although not really. We did a fancy dress party when I was in my first year of university that we decided was going to be sci-fi themed. This is me and the people that were living in a house with me. And between me and my mum, we came up with a very cobbled together Data cosplay. So it's not the best. It's certainly not professional quality or convention standards. But I can say I have cosplayed Data. So it's just another notch on the Star Trek fanboy, so to speak. So yeah, hopefully I haven't bored you too much to tears of talking about all this, but I'm just trying to think if there's anything I haven't gone over, and I don't believe there is. Just that I'm always keen to see people's kind of Star Trek cosplays and hear their particular Star Trek journeys and what kind of merchandise they have, what drew them into the franchise, what they like and dislike. Which is the other thing I should say, actually, because I always, or I'm hoping to, because we've only recorded one episode, ask for favourite series, which I've given you kind of Next Gen, closely followed by Voyager in my case. But I also am going to ask my guests for kind of what would they pick if they could pick a top 3 episodes that sort of best represent Trek or they think are their favourites, which means that now, unfortunately, I have to put myself on the spot and ask the same question. And my answers are going to be a little possibly strange. And I know there's going to be a load of them that I forget about and was like, oh, I should have said that. But off the top of my head, because of what they've kind of meant to me, I think I would have to say that my picks would be the original series, The Cage, Star Trek The Next Generation, Disaster, and just because it's a fantastically powerful piece of work, the Deep Space Nine episode, Far Beyond the Stars. But again, I love hundreds of the episodes, and there's some that I've tragically kind of had to leave out there that just to pick those three. But if I'm asking everyone else to do it, it's only fair, I guess, that I do the same. So, and not that I'd be asking anyone else, but if anyone's interested, my favorite ships include the new version of the Enterprise from Discovery and Strange New Worlds. I think is gorgeous. I've always loved, as I mentioned earlier, the Prometheus. I think it's a really cool design. It's neat. And yeah, of course, I love anything with the name USS Enterprise, really. Let's make sure history never forgets the name and all that. So I do have them all on my shelves. And yeah, even some of the newer stuff, you'll see that I've got the kind of USS Europa and the USS Shenzhou, and think they're really cool designs as well. So, and of course, Discovery, which it grew on me a lot. I already kind of liked it ish, but then it grew on me more and more, and I now absolutely love it, and I can't wait to get the Discovery A at some point, the upgraded version, but that's neither here nor there. So anyway, I won't keep rambling any longer, because kudos if you've managed to listen this long. It's just a kind of introductory thing, as I said, to put my thoughts down and give my answers to some questions that I'm going to be asking people. Hopefully you will be able to come and join us for the podcast proper. That will launch, as you'll have seen by now, on Sunday, the 5th of September at 3 p.m. And that will be our first episode, which is I'm joined by my special guest, Mr. Stephen Brown, an old friend of mine who I've known since we met in high school. So at least a couple of decades. And we will be discussing various things in the first hit or miss section, which will give you the impression of what that is, and then doing a full review of the Star Trek Next Generation pilot Encounter at Farpoint. So yeah, hopefully you'll be able to listen and enjoy. I've tried not to make it too long or too convoluted. So yeah, and in the meantime, everybody hopefully is enjoying brand new Star Trek at the moment. We have Lower Decks, of course, on, and yeah, hopefully everybody's enjoying any rewatches that they're doing, and just enjoying living the Star Trek life. So in the meantime, remember, we are Starfleet. Live long and prosper.